Welcome. As the debate over the debt ceiling continues, Democrats can still continue to try to hold on to entitlements. Republicans don't want to have any raise in taxes. Is something going to be done? Is there going to be a default? The Gang of Six have a plan, and there's a bipartisan group of lawmakers who are on board. My guest is venture capitalist and frequent financial commentator Peter Cohan. Peter, welcome back.
Well, thanks very much.
So, chances of a default, I guess, from what I'm reading, still here. It's still pretty small, but as you have said in other places, nothing's really been done yet, and there's no signatures, so we don't know.
Exactly. I mean, this is one of the things about Washington and what we're hearing about what's going on is that there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes that we aren't seeing. There's a lot of cross currents and a lot of politics going on that we don't know about. One of the things that I talked about on Sunday when I was doing an interview was that it seems to me that there is basically two groups of people in Washington right now. There are those who want to keep the government from defaulting, and there are those who would love to see the government default. And so the question about this latest deal from the Gang of Six is whether it will overpower the people who want to see the government default and basically not raise the debt ceiling.
What would be possibly the gain we would have from defaulting?
It would be a political gain. The people who want to see a default are supported by interests that don't want to see the debt ceiling raised and that want to see the government spending cut. So by not raising the debt ceiling, they actually win with their constituents. So it's pretty much purely political. It's purely this is what they were elected for, and they want to go ahead and do that, and they will get greater support from their supporters if they do, in fact, achieve that.
Have you had a chance to look at this proposed plan? Do you see anything in there that you could talk about?
Well, I haven't really got into the details of it, but I was listening to a discussion about it earlier today, and it sounds like it involves sort of a more balanced approach that involves cutting some expenses from the budget as well as eliminating about $1 billion or $1 trillion in loopholes. So there could be a lot of loopholes that would be eliminated, and basically that's would be, some people would perceive that as raising taxes. So the point is that that seems to reflect what President Obama wants, which is to work on balancing the budget or reducing the deficit, whatever you want to call it, through a combination of both tax increases and expense reductions.
Let's take away the political chasm that exists here and just talk about the pure economics of all this. If we were to default, there are those that say that we would face a similar 2008 kind of Armageddon where Lehman Brothers collapsed. What do you think?
I am not sure that would happen. I mean, one of the things that I found very interesting in doing some research on this is that we get something like 60% of our cash flows for the government from taxes and 40% from borrowing. So if we couldn't borrow any more money, we would just have to stop spending that 40%, which amounts to about $134 billion a month. And what that means is that there's a lot of different ways you could decide on $134 billion of checks not to write, but there is a scenario that says that if they did not get any more bonds, they couldn't issue any more bonds, that they would still be able to pay the $29 billion of interest on the debt. They would be able to pay $49 billion for the Social Security, $50 billion in Medicare, $32 billion for defense vendors, and about $13 billion for unemployment insurance. However, there are an awful lot of people who wouldn't get paid, including the Department of Education that wouldn't be getting $20 billion, federal salaries and benefits that wouldn't be getting $14 billion. So those are the ones that would end up suffering under that scenario. But the one that you mentioned before about sort of a financial Armageddon, word keeps coming up over and over again, is basically wouldn't happen because the key thing there is that people would be worried about financial Armageddon if we didn't pay interest on the debt, which meant that we couldn't borrow any more money. But if we're paying the interest on the debt, then the people who have the debt shouldn't be worried because they're getting their money. And the fact of the matter is that the payments that we're getting are 6 times the size of the interest payments.
The whole idea of the debt ceiling, although it obviously has a huge functionality here, some of this is symbolic. Now, we aren't seeing any big dip in the bond market right now, which you might think would be happening.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's another interesting thing, is that you can look at the verdict that the bond market is giving, and basically they're saying this isn't going to happen because the interest rates are so low. I mean, I haven't checked them today, but a few days ago, the yield on the 10-year government security was below 3%, which is really, really low. Mm-hmm. And another way to measure it is something called a credit default swap. You may remember the term
mm-hmm.
from 2008. Yes. Basically, it's bond insurance, and the premium on the bond insurance is still very, very low. It's 56.5 basis points for a 10-year note, which is still very low. I mean, some of these other countries are in the hundreds of basis points. So this is really a fairly low insurance premium for insuring against default on our 10-year note. So basically, what this tells you is that investors think that this is a bunch of political theater, but mm-hmm. that people would not in Washington would not actually go ahead and allow this default to happen. And the fact that Obama came out yesterday and said he liked what the Gang of Six was talking about is mm-hmm.
Encouraging. Well, we appreciate your time. What do you think the likely scenario will happen? Will this be some sort of 11th hour reprieve, or are we going to actually see something meaningful here? This is, again, the nature of the political underpinnings that we really don't have a good look at.
Yeah, my hunch is that they will come up with some last-minute, short-term stopgap solution that it doesn't really get at the long-term issues, but kicks the football down the field. But at least they'll be able to raise the debt ceiling so that we can, have another Washington drama, a few months in the future. But what they really want to do is make things really miserable for Obama, and they're really hoping that they can use this as a way of making him a one-term president. So it's an awfully nasty game that they're playing, and of course, everybody cites how the American people want this and the American people want that, but all they really care about is getting Obama out of office.
Mm-hmm. I think the latest polls show that the American people are just really sick of the whole thing right now.
Yeah, and the fact of the matter is that the people who really want the government to default really have a constituency of about 2 individuals who are funding the Tea Party, the Koch brothers, who mm-hmm. Koch Industries is the second largest privately held company in the country, a couple of billionaires, who are basically financing this Tea Party and would just love to see this whole thing. Mm-hmm. Namely, what I mean to say is they don't want the debt ceiling to be raised, and they do want to see government expenditures reduced.
Well, Peter, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for sharing your keen political and financial insight with us.
Thank you, Scott.
All right. Thank you for watching.